Hey everybody, I'm Cody. I help Lisa at Base58. Lisa, introduce yourself.
Hey y'all, I'm Lisa. I run Base58. We do Bitcoin protocol transaction class, and hopefully some Taproot and other stuff really soon too. We teach kids to code real good, especially just in Bitcoin. Yeah, Cody's the ITA, he helps out, he's awesome. And we're running this year, we're doing a 6-week series of Base58 encoding deep dives into open source Bitcoin projects. Last week we had Fediment. This week we are super excited to have Tony from Raspiblitz here to walk us through how Raspiblitz works, hopefully give us a tour of how it's set up, what the architecture is, maybe show us some bugs that we could maybe fix as first-time contributors, etc. So welcome, Tony. If you want to give us maybe a little bit of background about yourself and Raspiblitz and how you got involved in the project, and then maybe go ahead and take it from there.
Sure, I'll have it in my presentation. So yeah, let's just start with that. Can I start?
Yeah, can you hit share on your screen so that it goes big? Yeah, right now it's just your edge. There we go.
Is it better?
Cool. And then this one's just got the Zoom meeting. You can flip over to where you're recording.
Because I'm using OBS and that's why. Yeah, 1 second. Yeah. Can you make me unsure? Sorry for that.
Yeah, do you want
to
flip just to where your presentation is? For like the slides?
Yeah, 1 second, because I absolutely lost control over my Zoom. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Is it better?
There we go.
Better?
Yep. There we go. Awesome. Perfect.
Okay, cool. So Raspiblitz or Raspiblitz, because people are calling it different ways in Europe. Most people are calling it Raspiblitz. In USA, it's pronounced Raspiblitz. So yeah, what is it? It's just an open source Lightning Network node launcher that you can build yourself on your Raspberry Pi. Right now, version 4. We don't support version 3s anymore, but in past was also supporting version 3. So why is it cool? And so overall, like, we've got a lot of this kind of node products as a package in the ecosystem. Umbrel is probably the one that is most well-known of. Unfortunately, it's not like fully free open source. If you would like to make some changes to it, it's complicated legally. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of it because yeah, exactly of that, but it has pretty good user experience. A lot of people who are new to this space really like using it because it's just plug and play with like the web graphical user interface. So it's very easy to use for most of the people. In past, we had other things like Casa. Also, there is a Nodal. There is a bunch of these kind of nodes that are like prepackaged for you for Raspberry Pis. On the other spectrum, we have these like more open source things. Let me start with Raspibolt, because that was some sort of the idea for Raspiblitz, being honest. So Raspibolt is just the repository with the shell commands where you can have your Raspberry Pi with your hard drive and just run these different shell commands and just build your Bitcoin Lightning Network node yourself just by using these commands. So that's why on the user experience level, it's pretty low. It's really hard to do. But the Rutolf, who is like the creator of the Raspiblitz repository and the project, he decided to just package it all and like make it better, like make it even with like a screen, so people would use it on their home machines. It would be way easier to use. It would be better for hacking because it would be some sort of like a uniform platform where people could run their scripts on top of. And that's how Raspiblitz started. And like a bit of history of me related to the project is that in around 2017, I was a shitcoiner, and I was running my own shitcoin node on the Raspberry Pi 3. But at some point, let's say their chain grew, and the node was bad enough to not be able to run on this Raspberry Pi 3 anymore. And I had like fresh board, and I didn't know what to do with this board, and I figured out, okay, I'll just run Bitcoin on it because some people told me that it's possible to run Bitcoin on this board. So I like took like 2 weeks and started like deep diving on how can I like run these different shell scripts and like different shell commands to run my Bitcoin node on Raspberry Pi. And believe me, at this moment, it wasn't that easy as it is today. There weren't too many like resources on how to do that. You had to like ask people, and I didn't know anything about like how to do these things. So the next step was to run Lightning Network on the same node, and that like after I ran Lightning Network, I was like, okay, the shitcoins have no sense because Lightning Network was so awesome, and all this like, you know, the fight for having like 100 transactions per second, 1,000 transactions per second, without even being able to run your shitcoin on the Raspberry Pi node. It was like, yeah, why am I playing with that? So I just deep dive into Bitcoin, and Raspibolt was one of the first projects that happened that allowed me to fully understand what am I doing in this command line. And then Raspiblitz came out with even like better packaging and all these like scripts that you could run sort of in automated way. So yeah, these projects really like put me on the ropes to like being a good Bitcoiner and understanding what's the difference between like shitcoins and a Bitcoin. So yeah, there is also another level of like coolness. The more open source and the better you exit is, it's more cool, obviously. And none of these projects have this like ability to run this screen, which is another thing that like a lot of people that are seeing my my Raspberry Pi with this screen are always asking what's going on there. So it's like the conversation starter. Okay, so what actually is Raspiblitz? It's a like manager of Bitcoin, Lightning Network, a lot of packages, a lot of wallets. You can absolutely run everything that it's possible to run on top of Bitcoin on the Raspberry Pi. I never had any issues with like installing something that like, if I wanted to install something on my Raspberry Pi, it was always possible in the Bitcoin space. So yeah, so let me start from the Bitcoin. Obviously, there is a full Bitcoin node. On top of that, you have Lightning Network. With the newest version, previously we had only LND, but with the newest version, Raspiblitz also has C-Lightning, CLN. Yeah. And there's a lot of like different utilities like Electrum servers, BTC servers you can run on Tor or on the ClearNet, like Join Market, Thunder Hub, RTL, PyBlock, mempool explorers, everything that you would need as a Bitcoiner, it's there. And obviously it can be more like when I look at some things like Umbrel or some other node packages, sometimes they have these like newer, more how to say that, more specific packages, more specific wallets that aren't that popular right now. But with Raspiblitz, it's all possible. If these projects would like to add the project to Raspiblitz, it's pretty simple, and actually it's not that hard, which I will explain later on. So how Raspiblitz worked in past, it had this kind of SSH graphical user interface where you had this kind of, you SSH into it, and you had this kind of menus where you would just go through these menus and just use different options, install different packages, different wallets, different enhancements. So it was all based on this kind of menus. With the newer version 1.8 plus, Raspiblitz will be also having the web graphical user interface like this one. So very similar to Umbrel and other node packages, because it's like the team really wants people to use open source Bitcoin projects, and obviously not everyone is like keen to go into something like here, like this kind of SSH menus. It's a bit clunky. It doesn't look, you know, like recent, and it doesn't look like anything that people know as of now, like more like web-based, mobile-based type of interfaces. So yeah, so Raspiblitz is moving into this kind of interfaces, and as you can see, that's like the snippet that I took a few days ago. So this is what there is in the recent version as of now. And if you go into any other of like these kind of additions, projects that running on top of it, they are just running in their own like web interfaces, so you can just use them in the web browser as well. So that's one of the interfaces that you can run on your Raspiblitz. Okay, so what do you need to even like set it up? So yeah, I've created a setup tutorial. It actually has like 20,000 views as of now. It was added like two years ago. It's just my old presentation. I forgot about it. So yeah, so I created like the whole YouTube video on how to like source your hardware, because what you need is like Raspberry Pi board. You probably would need a heatsink or some kind of small fan. You need a power source to obviously power up a Raspberry Pi board. You need your HDD or SSD. I would suggest SSD as of now. In past, with HDDs, you could run it. Right now, it's like, it's hard. So at least 500 gigabytes. Yeah, that's a pump to crack, right? You need an SD card. Screen is optional, so screen is fun, and it's like, it's as I mentioned, it's just a cool thing to have on top of your Raspberry Pi, but you don't need it. And the same with case, it's optional, you don't need it. At the end of the presentation, I can show you like how I run my Raspberry, like how it's set up on my desk, and yeah, I really like how I set it up, and it's really complementary to whatever I'm doing. So you can have like cool utilities, like the cases that are like glowing in dark, different like armors that are dissipating heat, because it hits a bit with Bitcoin running on top of it all the time. So right now I've got 47 degrees on my Raspberry. So yeah, and it's with the armor and the fan. So, but it's pretty hot here in Canada right now. So again, depends what are your needs. So you can add different like utilities to it and make it just something that is like customizable. So basically how it's being built is that on top of this Raspberry Pi 4 board, here there is underneath, there is a slot for SD card. And on your SD card, you have your Raspberry Pi on operating system. It's based on Debian, and on top of that, there is like this code for Raspiblitz that is running on top of this operating system, and this is how it's like the project is being built. Actually, I never built the project myself, because there are way easier ways of doing it yourself if you already have a board and testing it without building it. So I'll just mention it later. But if you would like to build it, you have to like download the Debian. You have to like compile it with the recent repo of the Raspiblitz, and this is what you are plugging into your SD slot. And your board is running all the applications, everything that you're installing, like Electrum server, Bitcoin, Lightning Network, everything runs from your board. But on top of that, you've got your HDD or SSD, where all your data is being stored, because it would be pretty stupid to just run it from the board, because every restart would just reset everything. So on your SSD, you usually have like the whole Bitcoin chain, some configs for LND or like C-Lightning, or your states of your wallets. Like every config that you need is also on the SSD. So every time you are restarting the board, everything that you absolutely need, so your old states are on the SSD, which makes the project way easier to use, because like again, like imagine like restarting everything. So after every restart, after every like if you change something in the software, it will just look into the SSD and see if, oh, you wanted to have your Electrum server installed and you had it installed in your previous version. So let me actually install it when you just start the new, like boot the new SD card, and do it before you even start using it. So like for Bitcoin, it uses like Bitcoin user, and the data is being stored, I think, pretty default MNT. HTTP is that Bitcoin. For LND, again, it's user Bitcoin, and data is under the /LND on the SSD. The ports are default ones, so the ports are yeah, again, default ones. So it's, for me now, why I really like Raspberry is because it's super easy to use. It doesn't have any Dockers. It all runs from the shell scripts. And because of that, it's super cool to do like some hacky project on top of it, because you don't have to understand like how Dockers are running and what ports you have to connect to. It's just a standard Bitcoin, standard LND, standard Electrum server. Everything is like as it is by standard, and you just use it like as you should, without like looking into the different Dockers. You don't have to build any Dockers. If you want to like change something in the Bitcoin, you just go into like that Bitcoin and change the like bitcoin.conf, right? And that's it. With Docker, you would have to build it. Here, you don't have to. It's just you like restart Bitcoin with the new config. Here you go. You can just hack it. So that's why I really like this project, is because it's like so open, and it's like it doesn't have too many moving parts, making it very easy for beginner users to understand how all these things are working on the background, and how to use Bitcoin, how to even like query Bitcoin, and yeah, it's super cool. So when you want to develop something on the Raspiblitz, there are different steps to progress, and I sort of took it from the Rutzol presentation. He really explained it well in his presentation, so I really think that's the good way of presenting it. I also went through some of these steps myself, so I really feel that's the good way of like going at it. So the first thing, obviously, is just run your own Raspiblitz. I would say it would be pretty hard to contribute to the project if you don't run it yourself, because you have to like really experiment with that and like really try it out yourself. So the first thing is just run it, test it, report issues, run the newest version, try to replicate these issues, try to see what part of the code breaks some changes, what part of the changes breaks something on your Raspberry. The second thing is to experiment. So, for example, like my Raspberry doesn't have a Shortbits wallet, which is like one of the most popular wallets to use for DLCs, discrete log contracts, because it just doesn't have it. So when I wanted to like run my Shortbits wallet, I just connected it in my Raspberry. So I just ran all the binaries. I installed everything myself. And yeah, I just experimented. So I just installed it on the SD card itself. I didn't do any like automation on top of that. I just wanted it to run. So that's the second step, to experiment and like install new packages, install new wallets, install new like, I don't know, additions. On top of that, what you can do, if you already like experimented with new stuff, you can create like a small install script for yourself. It's like a shell script that will do all the installation automatic for you. So if I would like to, for example, do it on the Shortbits app, I would probably have to like get it from their GitHub, then the script would unpack it, then I would check some signatures and so forth and so on. So that's like the install script. That's like the next step that you would have to do to make it work, and like try it out, like create your own branch, test it, and again, like see if it works properly. On top of that, if you want to like progress, the next step would be to create some kind of configuration script. And all of these steps, I will just expand on them later on. I will just try to go through them right now, so you guys understand what's the progression, but later on I will go through the details of every of this step. So the configuration script is like the template script that, I mean, it can be built from the template on Raspiblitz, and most of these apps that I showed you earlier, all of these things, they have their own like single shell configuration script that like manages the whole packaging. So they may have like just basic option, like just install it, uninstall it, and that's it. And some of them just have only these two options, but some of them have more like management options in the Raspiblitz itself. So yeah, config script is the next step. And to make it, so at this point, at the config script, you can actually push it to the Raspiblitz repository, and it probably will be added to the like new release candidate, and people will be able to run it. But for people to run it in the better way, when it's already like tested and some people run it on their machines and everybody's happy with the addition, the next step is to build like this kind of SSH graphical user interface integration. It's actually pretty simple, and again, it's based on some templates. So if you don't know much about like shell scripting, graphical user interface, you can just take something that's already built, see how it's being built, and just copy it up for your project. And similar is for the web graphical user interface. It's just the Raspberry, it's just starting with the web graphical user interface, and there are not too many apps that are yet in this web graphical user interface menu. And I would say, a part of all these things, there is obviously, as it always is with other repos, a way of like just investigate or fix others' issues. And I would say, if you haven't done at least part of that like beginner level additions, I would start with that before like fixing others' issues, because again, like Raspiblitz is built mostly in shell, a bit of Python, a bit of TypeScript, JavaScript. So if you don't really understand how it's being built and how like the templates work, maybe it's better to just start with like building something yourself and then investigating or fixing the main issues. But if you feel you can do that, yeah, why not? So issues. Yeah, this is the page with issues, and mostly they relate to some different applications, because again, if you have all these applications for Raspiblitz, I think it's more than like 30 different bonus applications and like 20 additional ones just for like the Bitcoin/LNT type of applications. Yeah, there's a lot of things where you like bump the version up, something may be broken, and people don't know what's going on. So there is a lot of issues on that, on just the new versions. something isn't interacting properly. Maybe something like if you write the Lightning, maybe they have some connection broken to like C Lightning or something like that. Different APIs, different RPCs, and yeah, maybe that's even not on the Raspberry Pi side, Raspberry Pi side. Maybe it's on the side of like RTL. So because people again using it as just a manager of all these applications. So yeah, test it and see what's coming out. And many times when you fix one thing, the other thing is happening. So because it's pretty big project. So again, like it's yeah, it's hard sometimes. And yeah, a lot of things that are happening in Raspberry Pi project, because again, it's pretty big and extensive. Just the documentation, it has like enough text for you to read for like 2 hours and not go through all the documentation, and like even like basic how to use it and explanation of like how all these bonus apps are working. So there is a lot of like typos. So for typos, just use the GitHub interface. Just edit the file inside of it, like I've done yesterday for the sake of this presentation. Just make a pull request out of it, and that's it. Okay, so a few things that I haven't told yet, and I should at this moment. So when it comes to me, I'm not even a contributor to this project. So I'm related to this project mostly because I've done a lot of media on top of it. I've done a lot of videos on how to install things, how to use it. I tested it a lot. I've created a lot of issues. At the beginning, I was like trying to contribute a bit. When it comes to like this whole progression, I stopped at somewhere at this point at the config script, because yeah, I'm a bit lazy. So I hacked a lot of like different things on my own, but I never like found time to like push it. So yeah, shame on me. So I'm not like the maintainer. I'm not someone who is like very ingrained in like the code of this project. If you would ask for the people like that, there will be like OpenOms, Roto, and yeah, that are two main people. Also, if you want to develop something on top of Raspberry Pi, use the dev branch, because the main branch is unfortunately pretty old, and we don't develop on the main branch. We mostly develop on the dev branch, and again, like a lot of my pull requests got like bounced out of main branch, because I always forget that in Raspberry Pi you push to the dev, and if you want to do the changes, do it on the dev branch. And it's, I think right now it's like 300 commits ahead of like main, and yeah, everything is happening on the dev, because again, like everything, like when it comes to Raspberry Pi, we've got these main versions like 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, and they have some sort of like breaking changes that it will be really hard for people that are running like 1.7 to just update from their Raspberry Pi to 1.8. They would have to like reflash SD card and just start it again. So that's like the definition of like main main, forget the word. Anyway, that's like something where you have like your main project, and you're having the main versions of main versions. So main versions are like 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. And then you've got these like smaller versions like 1.8.1. Right now we are at 1.8.2 release candidate, and it's not even like the main version yet, because it has so many bugs that we can still work on and add a ton of things to like the graphical user interface on the web end and C Lightning, and yeah, there is a lot of things that still can be made better before it will be on the main branch. Okay, so testing, because it's like a hardware project. So when you run it on your own machine, sometimes the machine itself, like Raspberry Pi and SSD, may have issues. Like a lot of people with Raspberry Pi based nodes, they have issues that, for example, this SSD that you have, it has to be connected in some way to your Raspberry Pi. And a lot of these like cases for them, they have pretty bad drivers and they don't really operate well with Raspberry Pi based systems, especially the new one, Raspberry Pi 4. And there is some issue with like connecting to like the Bitcoin folders, and that it's lagging and it's not really saving new blocks to the SSD. So sometimes you just have to run this like software test or like even hardware test to see if everything is running correctly, what's the temperature, what's like your memory usage or things like that. But the software test is the best for like checking if everything is running properly. And if something is not running properly, like for example, you just installed the Write the Lightning application on your previous SD card, you wanted to update your SD card to the new Raspberry version, and you see that your Write the Lightning application isn't installing automatically, something is wrong, and the best way to debug it is to just go to main menu, repair options, and software test. So it will just dump you this kind of log file and just go through the log file, see if everything is running properly. If not, just copy something, write an issue about it, and yeah, see what other people have to say about that on the issue side. If you found some kind of issue on yourself, you can also obviously just use this GitHub issue finder, like not issue finder, like you can find what was like the output and just dump it here on the GitHub side and just find it. Even if it's like typo or something, it's the best way of like finding it in this kind of bigger projects on GitHub. So again, like experiment with your Raspberry Pi. So this is like how Umbrella looks like. And again, it has a lot of these different applications that Raspberry Pi doesn't have yet. So if you're a developer, I even have like the challenge for you, because if you think that there is something there is a project that is already added to Umbrella, maybe if you want to develop something on the Raspberry Pi and you are like pretty sure that you want to do that, you've got your Raspberry Pi, you want to experiment, you want to develop something, do something open source, just maybe contact one of these projects that are on Umbrella and they aren't yet on the Raspberry Pi, and maybe like ask for a bit of help. This is how I done it with like the short bits. I haven't installed it fully myself. I just asked for some help from the short bits team. Also, maybe you can ask them for like a small bounty. If you add it to Raspberry Pi, maybe they will be able to like pay you like, I don't know, 50,000, 100,000 sats. Why not? A lot of these projects, they just don't have time to do that, and that may be a cool way for you to just earn some sats to just add things to Raspberry Pi, and Raspberry Pi will be happy about that. Projects will be happy about it, and you will be happy about that. So yeah, keeping everybody happy here. Okay, so the install script. Install script is just the one that after you experimented, after you somewhat know what project you want to install on your Raspberry Pi, that's the thing that you will do yourself. And there is like no template for that. You just go into shell and start writing loops and different like echo types of outputs to just start with that, because Raspberry Pi usually start with like the fresh SD card, and that's like your default system. Again, like all the changes that you will do, you would have to add them to like the custom installs.shell. So if you create this kind of install script, like some kind of shell script, you would have to add it to the custom installs script on your HDD SSD, because again, like SD card always starts from the default system. And if you add it to the custom installs, then it will start it automatically on a reboot on every start and just install it for you automatically. So again, you can test it by inserting fresh SD card, see if it installs properly, if it's working well, run recovery, check the results if everything runs properly. And this is like the recovery debug location. So it's under home admin, Raspiblitz recovery log. So again, if it's under home admin, every new system restored, every new SD card that you put in to just notified blank, and you have to run all these steps again, except this step, because you already have it under your custom installs.shell. So the next step, if you have this kind of install script, just branch your Raspiblitz and make a pull request to your own branch of the Raspiblitz. And this is the moment when I wanted to sort of highlight, because on Raspiblitz, again, as I said, it's pretty hard to build it yourself. It's not that easy to just download the Debian, build it from the repo on top of it, like configure everything and like burn it on your SD card. It's way easier to just go into like main menu on Raspiblitz, click update, patch, go into like patch menu repo, and here you can literally specify your repo, like your username, your repo, and just pull the changes from the repo. Right now, I'm on the Rotzol branch. It's a dev branch. At least that was yesterday. And that's like the latest commit on it. So I did that, and just if I did that, the commit obviously changed for the newest one. And that's how you do that, because that's the best way and that's the fastest way. And in my opinion, mostly you should go this way because it's the easiest way. Okay, so again, there are some configs. So this is your temporary config. It's on the raspiblitz.info. It's like what system it has, what like architectures, what hardware you're running. It creates this file every time you start a new like SD card. It creates it. So every app that you will create runs as its own user. Again, like we had this Bitcoin user, for example, that was running the Bitcoin and LND. We do have like users, like admin is the one that runs, like it has all these like configs on top of it, and we have every app having its own user because it's easier to manage it later on when you have this kind of architecture. So users can be added to groups. It's mostly because like the macaron access. On Raspiblitz, we have 3 different main passwords. One password is like SSH password. So it's the password to just get into the machine. It's either for web graphical user interface, SSH, everything like SSH like uses like this kind of SSH password. It's like the sudo passwords. Yeah. Second password B, is RPC password. That's like the password for Bitcoin. And password C is the password for the LND wallet. Because every time you use something like RTL or ThunderHub, you need access to your like macarons and your password to your LND wallet, and that's like wallet C is your LND wallet password. I haven't played too much, unfortunately, with C Lightning, so sorry for that, but I plan to. And yeah, and I don't know yet how it works on the C Lightning side, so I won't be able to, unfortunately, tell how the passwords work there. But there probably is also like password C for the C Lightning. And for like web user interface, it's integrated with Nginx, like, yeah, because it has to work on SSL Tor, IP2Tor, ClearNet, everything like has to just work properly. So the next step after you oh, I missed this slide, sorry. So yeah, config script. So after you work on your repo branch, you will be probably ready to go into making your install script looking more like a template. Here we have on the top right, do you see my cursor? My mouse cursor?
Yep, we see
so awesome. So here where you go into /home admin config script, you have like a ton of this kind of config scripts, and one of them is template. So how I would go after, like, and I sort of tried going after that to add the short bits apps, is to look at one of these bonus scripts and see how they are being like developed, what's inside them, and like literally copy a lot of the things outside of like how to install the wallet itself, because a lot of it is just template, like the basic functions like on off, like I don't know, for some of them will be like change RPC or something like that. So yeah, there is a lot of these apps. You can like install them, see how they are working, and basically, because Raspiblitz is more like this kind of hacky project that developed from like the hacky mindset of having all these like possibilities and all of these different scripts and projects running on top of it. That's the moment where after doing this template, everybody, like, you can pull, like you can make a pull request out of your own bonus application, and like people will start running it even if it doesn't have any access to like graphical user interface yet, or either on SSH side or the website. So the basic functions in this bonus like templates are like on off. So you have to be able to install it and uninstall it. And in most cases, when you uninstall it, it will be the best if after you uninstall it, it's just clean. So it doesn't have any artifacts after being uninstalled, and then you can install it again. So that's like the basic function of this install script, to be able to like install it, uninstall it, and install it again without any issues. The configs for all these apps are under /mnt http raspiblitz.conf, and the application data is under mount http app data. So here's the app data, and you can see that I have installed Ride the Lightning. My Raspiblitz is pretty bare right now because I'm not having any channels, not having any wallets, because I'm still like developing on it, and that's why it's pretty bare. And I just have RTL installed. So under RTL, you can see like the logs and the config JSON. The JSON is actually more for like the web interface. So yeah, you have all these different things. And the recovery process, so the one that runs every time, because again, all these things here are on your hard drive. So if you want to restart your Raspiblitz, maybe with a new version of the main version, it would just look at the home admin bootstrap shell, and will just run this code to look for everything that you have installed in this like app data, and just look at the configs to like rerun it and reinstall it. So yeah, that's like the bootstrap process. Every time you change something on your SD card, like you reflash it or something like that.
Tony, do you have an example config file you could like walk us through?
Yeah, I'll be able to just briefly do that after. I can go through this because that's the config file, and I'll be able to do that after the presentation.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, so if you have this config file, this shell config file, again, you can just push it to the dev, and people will be able to just run it from the command line and test it. But that's not the end of the work. If you want the project to actually be usable by other users, obviously you have to add it to some kind of graphical user interfaces, because that's how most people are interacting with these projects. So first of all, it should be tested. So when you create this install script, it's like config script, people will test it and see how it's being how it operates on their Raspberry Pis. Then theoretically you should learn dialog or whiptail for SSH menus. But again, like I think a lot of these like dialog or whiptail usabilities can be just copied from other config scripts, and you can just briefly understand what's going on there. So it's not a big thing to understand like SSH menus, because it's not something that most of the developers would like to spend their time on. It's not like, I wouldn't call it a new front end development. So yeah, then all these additional apps need a status page. So they need like something like that, where it shows like the status. Is it on? Is it off? What's like their status? Again, like the logs should be added to the debug information, and especially what's important is the documentation. So, for example, for RTL, there is like the brief information on what RTL is, how it runs. I created a video about it, how to use it. So yeah, you need as much as support update documentation of that, because every of these projects is like separate thing that is being managed. And even most people on the Raspberry side, that when it comes to like maintainers, then they mostly won't be testing it themselves. They won't be like using it. They probably won't understand most of the capabilities of this wallet, and that's why you need this documentation. And yeah, it's important in my opinion. So the last thing that I would like to mention, I'm not too experienced in that. It's web graphical user interface, because it was added after I stopped being like pretty active contributor. So there are two repos that Raspiblitz is using right now. One is for the API. It's the Blitz API built in Python, and the other one is Raspiblitz Web, that is TypeScript library for just this view. So that's the TypeScript website, and it uses like Python APIs. And for the web graphical user interface, it's important to have only like simple commands, because usually through like SSH graphical user interface, you can have like multiple commands. You can have like whatever. You can have a lot of commands, because it's just this kind of SSH menu that I was showing you, right? So you can just arrow up and down and choose your options. But with the like web graphical user interface, it's important to have very simple commands. Just install, uninstall, and just click on the button to move you to this like additional tab that you will open this specific like wallet interface or some kind of project. So for web graphical user interface, you have to just reduce complexity for this usability. And to end this presentation, there is raspiblitz.org. It just briefly shows most of the things that I was explaining. It has a lot of links to different setup tutorials. Also, there are Telegram channels for users. It's like below the links to the Telegram channels. There are like even like multilingual Telegram channels. It's not only for English-speaking people. So yeah, it's pretty vibrant community, I would say, and yeah, the community is cool in Raspberries. And if you think that I may miss something in my presentation, there is also a presentation from Rutzol. It's a bit older, but I think it also goes through a lot of details. And yeah, I highly advise to watch it if you didn't understand something in my presentation. And yeah, that's it for this presentation. I will just go through the code in a second, but yeah, these are the links. So github.com/Rutzol/Raspiblitz. Follow Raspiblitz on Twitter, follow Rutzol and OpenOms on Twitter as well. These guys are like amazing. And the side story, like OpenOms actually also like start learning coding with Raspiblitz. So it's a great project for you to start learning. So it was one of his first projects, and now he's like the wizard. And yeah, I look up to him. So yeah, with Raspiblitz you can just start learning and go deep into that. And on my channel there are like different tutorials and like technical tutorials, mostly about Bitcoin, only about Bitcoin, I would say. Yeah. So that's it for the presentation. And right now, you wanted me to go a bit through the setup script, right? The config script. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the
config script that maybe you worked on or that you know pretty well, and kind of walk through how it works. That would be really great.
Being honest, I don't know well how it works, but I can show you a few things. So that's the repo. Everything you have is under like home admin. The home admin is actually what you find on your Raspiblitz under like home admin. So that's literally your home admin on the Raspiblitz. Can you see my console? Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So yeah, all these things here should be very similar to what's under like your home admin. And under the config scripts, you have all these different config scripts here. So there's a lot of additional config scripts for the Raspiblitz itself. If you want to have like, for example, static channel backup, or some kind of backup of your configs, or some test of your hardware, or run the debug, or do something with the display. Yeah, there's a ton of things that you can do itself with the Raspiblitz. There are these bonus applications, as I mentioned, like BTC Pay Server, Electrum, Faraday, Itchisats, Join Markets, a ton of different applications, Spectre Wallet, RTL, PipeLock, Loop Pool, and there are like C-Lightning specific and LND specific bonus config scripts as well. So for LND, because I'm not experienced with C-Lightning, there is like yeah, you can just init new wallet, or like do some kind of checking balance. It all uses the menus, so it all can be used through the menus. But let me go to start the show. And again, like it's all a template. So maybe I'll go to the template. So yeah, that's the template. Basically, it's like every template should have some kind of specific app ID, which like for RTL, you would probably call it RTL. For every app, you have to name it with some kind of default name that is unique for every of these applications. You couldn't like call it Itchisats because there's already like Itchisats or RTL. So app ID will be just something specific. Obviously, the link to GitHub repo, the version of GitHub repo. Usually, when we have like this kind of pull requests, a lot of the pull request is just this thing, update the version, and that's it. Because again, there is a lot of these different apps there. So that's why you have to specify the GitHub version. If you want to have the signature verification, which usually you want to have, that's the field for that. Again, like the default port numbers that are specific for this specific app. If that would be, because I only know Bitcoin Lightning LND, if that would be Bitcoin, the port would be 8080. For LND, it will be 10,009. That's important. This is something that I mentioned, the command line option. The command line options. So you can have different statuses of your application. So on, off, that's like the most important thing. Install, uninstall. And also like menu, status, restart. For more applications, you can have like bigger menus, more statuses, whatever you want, like testnet maybe. What's more, you want to load your config, check if application is installed. That's like the basic script to see if it runs through a process, and if services are running. And then it's all about like installation. So it's more about like having these loops to check if something is running, if it's not running, like check the status, depends on the status, do something, or like install it, uninstall it, change, bump the version. You can do a lot of these things yourself, even without, and that's where we come into the cool thing about Raspberry. Because if for example, I'm version of, let's assume I would do this thing myself. So I run the version 0.4.21, but I just decide to bump it up myself. So I'll just go into console and bump it to 0.5.0. That won't change my configs, right? So that will just install the newer version of application on my Raspberry. And if I would at that moment use it, it would probably be usable, but every config file will be still pointing to this one. So if I would break something like on this 0.5.0 on my Raspberry, and I want to like recover it, what I would just do is just take off my SD card out of the Raspberry, refresh it with the like recent version of the release, plug it again, and it would still be 0.4.21 because that was in the config. So again, amazing project to just hack on and do breaking changes and do them fast, and just, yeah, it's great for that. So going back to the setup script, this is the menu version, and that will be showing like the different like dialog text, what you should do. Like there will be, depend if it's like Tor or is it not Tor, is it like ClearNet. Again, like whiptail is like specific for this SSH graphical user interface. And yeah, there are different menus, and it's very, I think if you want to get deep into that, you would understand it. It just, I don't want to go through it and like explain it today, because I don't feel I'm ready for that to explain it line by line. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory in most cases. It has a lot of descriptions. So yeah, I think I will leave it on that today. And one more thing that I want to show is because I just updated yesterday to the new new dev branch. So I updated it to this commit yesterday, and it broken my web user interface. So so that's something that will happen, and that's awesome that that is happening, because now I'll look at the changes, what happened before this commit and the latest commit that is working, and see if that's like the issue somewhere there in the code, or like who broke it, and like, I'll try to write an issue on that. So yeah, a lot of things are happening, so a lot of things can break. And I just wanted to mention it that this is a hacking project. So it's not on the main branch, it's on the dev branch. So again, it's a hacking project, and these things will happen. If you are into development, you may find it pretty cool and interesting to deep dive into that and just start fixing it and playing with that.
Tony, do we want to try and figure out the problem?
I probably won't do that, being honest. I'm not skillful enough to do it today live. So
I think okay. Oh, yeah, okay.
I just know what is my current level of like understanding it's probably related to some kind of web user interface libraries that I was showing in the presentation. Probably either this or this, and I haven't yet played with them, so I won't be able to do it myself right now. So sorry for that. I just know what my level of competency is.
That's all good. Hey, so just kind of like summarizing. So this is something that I didn't really understand about Raspiblitz, but it was like cool that as you were going through this, was that so when like the other node in a box solutions like Umbrel or like the actual open source version of that, Citadel, is that they're using Docker and they're organizing every single one of the different applications as like a different Docker container. And so when you want to add anything in there, we're going to spin up a new virtual machine, or like within like the virtual machine where we have all of our Docker containers. You have to like add to the Docker compose, and you have to make a Docker image of every single one of these. But the Raspiblitz project is running on Debian, and so all of the like basic, like within Bitcoin, everyone seems to be developing like primarily for like Ubuntu and Debian based systems. And so
yeah, it doesn't matter if it runs on Debian or not, because all these like all these packaged Kubernetes-based type of things are also running on Debian. For example, Umbrel. Yeah. It also runs on Debian. It's just different. Sorry, that was my dog. It's a different architecture because it runs on the shell scripts rather than this like this Kubernetes packaging Dockers and things like that. So yeah, it's completely different because it just installs it as it is. It's not building like a specific VM. It just installs it like directly on your SD card, and then you have a configs on SSD, but it all like installs it on your SD card, and that's how it's different. It doesn't have any like virtualization. Everything that runs is just purely like step by step. What would you do just on like bare Linux?
Yeah, and so for building everything on there, it seems like all of like just kind of the default scripts in whatever the project is, because they normally do the default scripts based off of like a normal Linux system. It's not like for Umbrel or for Citadel where you have to like do a specialized thing and like, hey, you have to run this in Docker, you have to do this, like all these different things for it. Is that like, so if Core Lightning updates like their README for like the process for updating it, that basically is like one-to-one match with what updates you're going to have to do within the Raspiblitz. Okay, gotcha. That's super cool. Yeah. So for when you're doing the development environment for that, you said like you run it on like the actual Raspberry, and that you're updating the Raspberry that you're actually running there, right? So do you have like a separate one for development versus like what you would actually use?
Sorry, can you repeat the last?
Do you have like a separate like Raspberry setup for development versus the one that you actually use?
I had, but I sent one of my Raspberries to a friend who wanted to have his node, and I end up with just one machine. That's why I only have a dev one right now.
Okay.
And that's what I'm using for development, because usually I have two. I've got one which I'm using just as my main node for Lightning. I'm not breaking anything on it. I'm just using it with the main branch with defaults.
Okay.
And I'm not changing anything. But I've got this one that actually I'll show.
Oh yeah, there we go.
So my Raspiblitz. Okay, this is like on my desk. So this is my desk, and it's like in the corner. And yeah, I'm just developing on it, and yeah,
Okay.
it's convenient. And again, like a lot of people don't know, but actually with all this like packaged Lightning Bitcoin Lightning Network nodes, you can have a Wi-Fi connection, because like what by default you would see in most of like the tutorials is just take the Ethernet cable and just connect it to your modem, right? But there is a very simple hack to just add like one piece of like very small piece of code to your boot on the SD card when you are putting it on your computer from the repo, and that will that's like the config for your Wi-Fi, and that will stay there, and it will always connect by default to your Wi-Fi. So that's a cool thing. And if you don't have the screen, that's another thing that I would like to mention, because the screen is like showing you. That's why screen is so awesome, because like you've got the screen and you booted it up for the first time, and it will show you the IP address like in your local network IP address. While for many other projects, if you don't have that, you would have to like go either to your like Wi-Fi interface to your modem, or you would have to like use something like IP scanners to check for which IPs are for like this, like your Raspiblitz or like your Umbrel or something like that. And the screen is like, in my opinion, it's super like dummy friendly, because you already like have all the instructions there. So there is this connection between like where people are putting SD card and like putting the Raspberry Pi based node managers for the first time, and what they should do on their computer. And they like, there's this like layer of disconnection, and having the screen is really helping with that. And it's like sort of making this gap a bit smaller and easier to use for the end user. I think you're muted.
And so on the screen, that's just a shell. So all of those shell menus that you're making within all the different apps, you can access those from the screen of the Raspiblitz.
You may access that. I'm actually not doing that. I'm usually just using SSH, because the screen is just for my like when I have my Raspiblitz setup, I just see if everything is well connected, everything is green. I see how many channels I have. I see what are my balances. It's just more about like a status. But if I want to do something specific, working on this 3.5 inches screen, it's not the best way. It's more like having the status of your machine, and like what the temperature is, what's the memory usage. I can just look at it right now and just what Bitcoin version I'm running, what Lightning network I'm running. It's just more, again, like more like a status. You can have like a stylus and go into like the specific menus. There is like the bonus option on installing those menus. I'm just not a big fan of that, because like I can easily just use it through SSH, or like I really like using it even through command line to just access some specific bonus application through command line, rather than like I'm a sort of a super user in that case, that even when at some point like Raspberry didn't have this kind of recover menu, so I knew what like menus I have to run each by each to like recover things myself. So yeah, it's pretty easy to do so. And also one important thing is that I haven't mentioned, it also has an option to because again, like everything is stored on your hard drive. So even if you run something like Umbrel and you decide, okay, I don't want to run Umbrel, I want to run Raspiblitz. So literally my Raspiblitz right now, the setup I have, it has the data on the hard drive from my Umbrel that I like installed just to test something before that I wasn't being able to test on the Raspiblitz. So yeah, it's you just plug your SD card with the Raspiblitz, the Umbrel setup, and everything should like repair, install. You will have the same Lightning Network password. You will have the same Bitcoin password. You will have like the whole Bitcoin already synced on your hard drive. You will have like your wallets on the hard drive, all the configs. You don't have to do much. Just install the additional apps, and that's it.
Okay, cool. And you said that it's just a single line for connecting over Wi-Fi, and Alex was kind of
Actually, it's 5 lines. Yeah, it's 5 lines.
Could you show us where that is? Just like if we wanted, so just because that's like a kind of consistent issue that people have with like these node in a box solutions is that like it's annoying to connect to them. But you seem
one second,
like Raspiblitz is super easy.
I know I have it in my video. I don't know where I found it before. I don't think it's in the documentation, being honest, because we've changed the documentation. 1 second.
That's also for your documentation is like excellent on all this thing. Like it seems like all of the documentation is extremely extensive. It seems like a lot of the code is documentation.
That's a good question. So let me. I will add it after the call, okay? Because it's like I have it in my video. I don't know where the source is. It's in some of my GitHub spots. It's not something that people are using pretty often because not many people are aware of that. So it's not something that is being used too often. And I would like to promote it because like every Raspberry Pi has a Wi-Fi built-in. So why not use that, and why these ugly cables? And yeah, I absolutely don't understand that.
Yeah, and so for connecting to it, it's because you're just running a Debian system. It's not, you don't have to deal with all the Docker stuff of exposing ports and all that kind of stuff. It's just like standard way that you would connect just over.
Okay, on that. Export, so right? So that's a good question, because usually what I would suggest for most people is to run everything on Tor. There is like the option if you start Raspiblitz, or Umbrel is actually doing it by default, which I don't like because I don't like defaults. But on Raspiblitz, you can choose at the start. Are you running on ClearNet? Are you running on Tor? And every time, like at any moment, if you run on ClearNet, you can switch to Tor. Every time you run on Tor, you can switch to ClearNet. So when it comes to the running of Tor, it's great for like the home usage because you don't probably have a static IP. You probably don't know how to expose your ports on the on your router to allow like different outside applications. Like if you want to connect a Zeus wallet, for example, you'd have to open some ports. Most people don't know how to do that, and for that, I would advise against the ClearNet and for Tor, because Tor would automatically like create this port. Like it's a different network, so it will automatically have these ports open for you, and you don't have to do anything on top of like your modem or your router or anything like that to open these ports. So Tor in that case is better, because again, like the ports for most people it's pretty tough to manage themselves.
Okay, that makes sense. Lisa, you got more questions?
I think we had a couple in the chat. Alex was asking if you have favorite hardware for running your Raspiblitz on.
Raspberry Pi 4 plus some type of like this shell that I was showing, this kind of aluminum shell, and maybe a fan, to brushless fan. Definitely brushless fan.
Yeah, and the other question I had for you is like, so it looks like there's a lot of apps and stuff, and the Raspiblitz is like, seems like pretty full featured. Like, what's on the project's roadmap, or like what are you working on adding and changing about Raspiblitz? Like what kind of improvements can we expect to see in the next like few months? And what's maybe something someone could like, you know, that you're looking for help with?
So definitely what I see on the development side, again, I'm not a maintainer, but the push is for adding this web user interface and making it so it's not doing the things that I was showing today. So this kind of circle that is like going and going and going. So definitely web interface, C Lightning, because that's a new thing to Raspiblitz, and I think the C Lightning is it C Lightning or CLM?
Core Lightning.
Core Lightning. Okay.
Okay.
So mostly those two things, and every time somebody wants to add a new application, it's an open source project. So if like the install scripts are running, if there is like the graphical user interface for SSH, if there is some documentation, yeah, why not? Like it will be pulled, obviously, because it's a hacky project, and we want to have as many of these different wallets projects supported as possible, and it's cool when people are just spending their time adding their favorite applications. It's not really in many cases it's not even like the development team of the project. It's like some like fanatic that just wants to see it on the Raspiblitz, and they are like so angry that it doesn't run on the Raspiblitz, but they are just adding it. That's like me with the short bits, actually. Like that's why I'm like sort of get back into like Raspiblitz development, because I want to add the short bits up, and I really want for other people to use it. And yeah, there is no other way than just adding it. So mostly, yeah, web user interface. This project that is working with like Python APIs, TypeScript front end, plus yeah, more apps and C Lightning. I think that's like the future. And I myself will be as always mostly on the side of just showing people how to use it, why to use it, and showing these different tools, and just, yeah, having like being a Bitcoin marketing division.
Cool.
And I see the question, if I have tried the P400. I haven't, but it uses like Raspberry Pi 4 as a board inside. So if you can take the board out, I think it will be like the same, or you can use even like Pi 400 as like your hardware. So I don't think it will be an issue if you're using that.
Cool. Yeah. I was just thinking, like, as I'm looking through this repo, like, it seems like for all of these projects that you have there too, like, it's also kind of like maybe just a useful thing if you want to install those projects individually. Then it's like, hey, this script file for each one of them has like all of the different script commands basically that you're gonna have to run, because like even independent of just the Raspberry Pi itself, right? Because like that's so
yeah. So
like,
that's what you would do as a user. You would have just bare Raspiblitz with like Bitcoin Lightning, and then that's your choice what you want to install from the menus, because running everything on the Raspiblitz, it's not advisable. It's still like a small factor computer, and having it installed for every user, every application, it's just not feasible, and they most likely won't use it, won't understand what's going on. It will just take resources, and yeah.
Yeah, and so like I'm thinking about this in terms of like Fediment, of moving that onto there, and like I just saw in the config script that you're doing is that you're literally just pulling the GitHub repo for it, and so like all of a sudden that makes everything much easier right? So as long as you have the dependencies set up, then you can do that one, and so it's
and again, like in config files, you will find like the dependencies. If like some things need to have like some npm installed, or like JavaScript or something like that, and you already like have it in the config, because probably Electron wallet, if you have like Electron wallet installed, it uses some of it, like ThunderHub uses some of it, so you already can find it. Oh, you already have that installed, so you don't even have to go through this step of like installing it. If you like read the config in the shell script, then it's, you know, just installing the bare bone of like the fedimint, and that's it.
Yeah, is there any language limitations, or is it just for? I guess not, because it's
No.
just running Debian, and so
Yeah,
it's just,
exactly. It's just, yeah.
because you're running
If
like
you
a
want to
Lect
install
RS.
like Python, you would just install Python. But I think again, like on Raspiblitz, Python is installed.
Yeah.
For many of the applications, like Java is installed by default. So yeah, it depends what's already installed on the board. If it's not installed, you definitely need to have it like as some kind of loop in your config script, obviously, because it has to check if it's installed. But in most cases, it will be already installed, because Raspiblitz by the start is installing a lot of these additional things that are usually used by like TypeScript, Python, npm, Java, most likely. I'm not sure about Java, but most likely.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, so that'd be super fast for setting it up. It's just, I mean, it seems like just any project within Bitcoin, as long as it's got an Ubuntu build or a Debian build, there's that you just go through their README, take the shell commands over, and then
exactly
the config file, and then you're done.
And that's why I had this presentation, because I want people to see how easy it is. Like, I'm a dummy. Like, I'm not a good software developer. Like, I'm more working with data, and I'm better on that front. But I still like can go into Raspberries. If I would spend some time in it, I can just, you know, add new projects to it. So it's not that hard. It's actually pretty great project to start contributing. And at the same time, learning a bit of shell, and shell will always be a good thing to know, because that's how you like automate your projects. And yeah, I like it. And yeah, there is a peer swap config. Yeah, there is the peer swap will be probably merged soon. So yeah, a lot of things happening.
Yeah, so on the development side, the things that you said you're looking for is you're looking for TypeScript developers for the web user interface, just core Lightning in general, because for all of the, I think probably for all the configs as of right now, is that they're all
a lot of testing. Yeah, also, yeah.
Right, and so like you basically have to add ifs for everything of like, you know, if core Lightning's running or if LND is running, then
yeah. So for example, we've got this like for LND, we've got like these static channel backups, right? For like Dropbox and like two other clouds next something, two other like cloud sharing services. It can also be added to like, I don't know what's like the static channel backup on C Lightning, but also it can be added there, right? So yeah, a bunch of like possibilities. Just copy whatever is right now on LND and just do it to similar things for C Lightning, and just add these configs. And yeah, it will be awesome.
Yeah, sweet. Cool. That's all the questions I have. Lisa, you got any more?
No, nothing on my mind. Just to say thank you, Tony, for taking the time to come and talk to us about Raspiblitz. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think like so next week, I think we've got I think I'm still figuring out exactly the speaker. It's supposed to be JB55 and who's gonna come talk to us about some stuff he's been working on Lightning.
Vancouver strong. Vancouver strong.
Yeah. Are you also in Canada? Oh, nice.
I'm in Vancouver, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He's, I guess, all right. You guys are like probably neighbors then. Okay, cool.
Yeah, he's a neighbor.
Yeah, so he's, I gotta check in with him and confirm that he's coming. So I will post whenever we figure that out and get that nailed down. But yeah, super cool. So hopefully you can come hang out too with, poking the screen or something, you know.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so I'll go over the connection links again, but yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and see you guys next week. So for if you want to contribute to Raspiblitz, just like Tony was going over, which I just closed my screen, is you've got raspiblitz.org, and then this is kind of like your kind of starting point for everything that you want to connect to. They've got the GitHub, and from there, that's where you can start contributing. And just like Tony was saying, is that there's a lot of just like updating like little things, like because the shell scripts are a specific version or something like that. And so it's like a good place that you can get started of making sure that like, hey, if there's a new release, anytime there's like a Bitcoin Optech newsletter that comes out, it's like, hey, there's new releases for different Bitcoin things, then you can update those. And then these questions and support groups for Telegram. They've got English, German, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and then wow, that's a lot. That's super cool. But yeah, so you can get started there. So cool. Thanks everybody. It's cool. And see you guys next week. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.